Folks, they're getting ready to pass it. The lawmakers in the House are moving to vote on a stopgap spending bill this month. It would prevent a government shutdown this year and cuts to be finalized. And the GOP leaders are discussing the possibility of putting a stopgap spending bill on the floor as soon as this month, just as a safe option. It's while they try to build support for passing appropriation bills that appear on shaky ground. And according to aides familiar with the conversations, the idea is to have a stopgap in place to continue government funding past the September 30th deadline. And that move would avoid a partial government shutdown in October, if the Senate also passed the stopgap and President Biden signed into law. Some Republicans view passing a stopgap ahead of time as a way to take a shutdown off the table, and moving around the pressure from Democrats to accept another bill to have higher spending than conservatives want. Even GOP leaders are holding ongoing discussions with rank-and-file members to try to build enough support to pass all the years in 2024 bills. And they recognize that additional changes may be needed to get the 218 votes needed for passage. Some hardline conservatives might still block the consideration of bills that don't even cut spending, despite leaders having already exceeded many of their demands. Leadership's preference is to find a way to pass the annual appropriations bill to set up a strong negotiating position with the Senate. Just 5 Republicans can block any of the bills, and the Democrats are expected to be unified against them. Even GOP leaders have sought to build consensus partly by setting spending allocations below the top-line levels, agreed to in last month's debt limit suspension law. But in the narrowly divided House, some members of the Freedom Caucus and others are threatening to withhold their support as they seek deeper cuts. Even some representatives have told reporters that they're very frustrated and don't know how they can get off the train of continuous spending. They cannot support leadership that's planning to tap roughly $15 billion appropriated for unspent funds, and there is no immediate need for a stopgap measure this month since the fiscal year does not even end until September 30th. But if the House Republicans can agree on regular spending bills, they'll be at a disadvantage when they go to the bargaining table with the Senate. The ultimate fallback option would be a full-year CR, but that measure would actually appease almost no one and could face opposition from multiple fronts. Even House conservatives have also proposed raising the retirement age to collect Social Security. The proposal by the 176-member House Republican Study Committee would gradually increase the retirement age, ultimately hitting 69 years old for those turning 62 years old. The current retirement age for full benefits is 66 and rising gradually to 67. Democrats have successfully used similar proposals from fiscal conservatives to their advantage in the 2022 midterm election. Under the plan, benefits for current retirees wouldn't be cut, but for those expecting an early retirement benefit, it would be lower. And the group has abandoned a proposal from last year that would have increased the Medicare permanent retirement age, but they do seek to further privatize the program. Even Joe Biden has Republicans got into an argument during the State of the Union address after Biden said that some GOP favored cuts in Medicare and Social Security, but members said that the group has a responsibility to push their proposal, causing it and casting it as a more sustainable option than leaving the programs untouched.
Well, thank you, Patrick. Appreciate your work. Look, there's been a lot of hard work and a lot of late nights that have gone into changing the spending trajectory in this town that has brought us to this point where we've got over $31 trillion in debt. And tonight is no different. You see how late it is? The work's not going to stop for a long time. There's a lot of work that needs to continue to go into fixing all of the problems that President Biden has created. You see inflation through the roof. You see the struggles that hardworking families are experiencing because Washington went on a multi-trillion-dollar spending binge over the last 2 years. And Joe Biden didn't want that spending binge to end. But the American people had a different idea when they elected a House Republican majority committed to finally getting spending under control in Washington. And that's what this bill is about. You know, something you haven't seen in a long time in this town is that when a major bill comes to the floor, we actually give our members time to read the bill before you vote on it. We have a 72-hour minimum that we allow every member to read the bill. And the more that people read in this bill, the more they find in terms of real conservative victories that are going to help us get spending under control and get our economy back on track. And you have to do both. You will never get to a balanced budget unless you do two major things. One is control Washington's spending obsession, but also you've got to help get people back to work. You've got to help get the economy moving again. And there are a number of pieces in this bill that never would have existed if Nancy Pelosi was still Speaker of the House. Everybody knows that if
We have a ton of news about the fourth stimulus checks, Social Security benefits, SSI, and SSDI. A ton of news about the fourth stimulus payments are coming in. I have a lot of information that I'm going to share with you guys today in this video, so continue watching. The several lawmakers, everybody in Congress, have discussed new inflation relief checks for the people. So if you reside in states like Minnesota or Massachusetts, well, you may qualify for at least another stimulus check this year. It comes as budgets are being finalized, states are planning to use the budget surpluses for another round of checks. So a lot of good things are happening in Congress, and a lot of stimulus payments can actually be sent out faster than we ever thought in the history of our lives. So, as I was saying, it's official. The governor in several states like Minnesota have actually hoped to include a tax rebate in the state's upcoming budget. It comes from the announcements of the state's budget. It's set to go for January 24. And according to the Associated Press, well, the budget will propose indexing state aid for school districts just to help combat inflation. So Waltz has told reporters that I think people are feeling inflation. Even though it might be cooling a little bit, there's a slight sense of urgency among people to get something done. And that's good here. Something should be done because the Governor Waltz's original pitch for the tax rebates has been quite generous for a lot of people. It gives single filers, for instance, a lot of breathing room, a lot of time to just think about what they can do, and now the government has already signed them into a second term. So, though not all of these fellow lawmakers share the priorities, though, because the House Speaker and Majority Leader claimed they wanted to prioritize tax credits for families, giving the families $3,000 for every child 5 or younger, with a cap of $7,500. Even the Massachusetts governor and top lawmakers signaled that a clear picture of potential tax relief may not even emerge until at least the end of January, when a key final metric is actually heard of. So one governor, for instance, said their teams are working closely through numbers and evaluating what's possible. They said that we told reporters how important it is to make sure that we're doing everything we can for the residents of the state. And Healy on the campaign trail had vowed to make progressive permanent tax relief her day one priority. She also had largely echoed support for the now former governor Charlie Baker's sweeping tax cut proposal last year. And low, middle, and income residents have all received some stimulus payments just to stop the crying at least. But now the IRS said it recently finished correcting tax returns, filing that for 2020. And so the IRS said, folks, that the average tax refund is around $1,200, with tax agencies sending a total of $15 billion back to the taxpayers. So while taxpayers were sent letters from the IRS just to inform them about the fixes to the 2020 tax filings, well, tax review came due to the American Rescue Plan. It was signed by Joe Biden, we all know that, and because the IRS, it reviewed returns filed by workers and even other people who have jobless aid as income. So the IRS told CNBC that some taxpayers received refunds while others received overpayment.